You're listening to KOUG Radio. Listen live online at KOUGradio.org.
What is going on, everyone? Happy Thursday. Welcome back to another episode of Sports Takes with Dom. I'm your host, Dominic Persinger, live at KOUG Radio. Today is April 20th. Happy 420, you guys. And I have an NBA recap and UFC prediction. First, I have 7 fight predictions for the 12-fight UFC card this Saturday. Pavlovich versus Blades. Then I have 6 NBA first-round series breakdowns, as each series is at 2 games apiece. And I'll end it, of course, with some news of the day. And some news to start off the show really quick. Kawhi Leonard, star forward for the Los Angeles Clippers, has been ruled out for Game 3. That is huge, obviously, because I need the Phoenix Suns in that series, and obviously I have the Suns winning in 7. So, yeah, the Clippers, that's huge, being down Paul George and Kawhi. So, yeah, huge announcement as of 15 minutes ago per Woj. Kawhi's going to be out. So, yeah, starting off with my UFC predictions, starting off with the feature prelim of the night. This is for UFC Vegas 71, Pavlovich versus Blades. So starting off with the bantamweight 135-pound fight, we got Montel Jackson versus Ronnie Yaha. So fun fact, both these guys share a common opponent in Ricky Simone. Both have lost to Ricky Simone. Shout out Vancouver's best, Ricky Simone. Anyways, Montel Jackson, he's 12-2, 6-2 in the UFC, coming off the dominant decision over Julio Arce last November. So Montel Jackson is 30 years old, and he's a huge 5'10 for 135, and he's got a 75-inch reach, which is also very lengthy. And he's super tall for the division, like I said. Really nice reach. He pairs very nicely because he has very good physical features with his excellent boxing. He does have wrestling in his arsenal, and he actually has really good power in his hands too. I want to say he has like 12 knockdowns in the division. He actually has a knockdown streak going where he's had a knockdown, I believe, in 3 or 4 of his last fights. So yeah, Jackson on his best day, I would say, is probably one of the scariest guys in the division, but that's on his best day. I mean, he's only 12-2. 12-2 is a great record, especially being 6-2 in the UFC. So moving over to Ronnie Yahya. Ronnie Yahya, he's 28-10-1, with that 1 being a draw, and he's 13-4-1 in UFC, and he's coming off a 2-fight win streak, but he hasn't fought in 18 months, and those guys were a lot lower level of opponents. And yeah, he's an aging 38 years old, and that's not encouraging when he's been out for a year and a half, and he's 5'6" with the 67-inch reach. So Ronnie has very impressive. He has 22 submissions on his resume, but 0 knockouts. Like, he has some of the best grappling in the division, but he struggles to get the fight to the ground. Like, he's not a very good wrestler. Like, looking at his takedown accuracy, it's at 33%, and he's terrible in the boxing too. Pretty much, he needs to have. To have any sort of chance of winning, he needs to be in the grappling, which we'll see if that can even get there in this fight. So looking at the actual fight, Montel Jackson should have a pretty easy time in this fight. He's a great wrestler. I trust he'll probably stuff all of Ronnie's takedown attempts, to get into the grappling, because he's primarily a grappler. I also hope Jackson will be smart enough here, which I think he will be, and he won't shoot like a takedown of his own. There's no reason for him to do that when he's obviously gonna be the better boxer. Especially when that's Ronnie's only threat. Why would you shoot a takedown when you're obviously gonna be better in the boxing? You have that advantage. So yeah, if Jackson's smart, he keeps his fight on the feet, and he keeps in the boxing. I think he'll be the clear better fighter. I think Jackson lands heavy power and he knocks out Ronnie, maybe like in I'm calling second round. Montel Jackson's second round knockout. Now moving on to the main card, the 6-fight main card for UFC Vegas 71. We got a lightweight 155-pound fight from, it's between Ricky Glenn and Chris Giagos. So I'll start with Glenn. Glenn is 22-6-2 with 2 of those being a draw, and he's 4-3-1 in the UFC, and he's coming off the majority draw to Grant Dawson 18 months ago. So he's also been out for a while. A lot of guys come out with long layoffs on this card, I would say. And Glenn's 34 years old, and he's 6 foot with a 70-inch reach. So yeah, Ricky has decent striking. He's pretty good striking with some wrestling, but like not too much wrestling, I would say, in his back pocket. He has an impressive 13 knockouts, so that's saying something. But he's a very slow starter. You don't see a lot of like early finishes in his career. So yeah, Glenn's been super inactive the last few years. Like, as I said, he's coming off the 1.5 year layoff. I'm surprised he hasn't fought in this long either, because like he had an impressive outing in his last fight. You know, like to draw someone like Grant Dawson, that's an impressive fight. I don't know where he's been exactly. Not sure on that. But like I said, in his last fight, I remember it was the co-main of a free fight night back in, it was the fall of 2021. I want to say like October. It's been so long for him away from the cage. Like, I don't know what's been keeping him away, but it doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, he's a great fighter, and he's been fighting great fighters too. So looking at Yego's is 19-10. He's 5-6 in the UFC, and he's coming off the first round submission loss to Thiago Moises last summer. And he's 33 years old, 5'10 with a 71-inch reach. So Yego's is very dangerous early. That's kind of his bread and butter. But he still has a decent gas tank. Don't act like he's that guy, you know, who can only get it done early. He can get it done throughout the fight. He has good cardio. He's an impressive fighter. His big thing is he has great wrestling, and you know, he has a lot of wins by decision. Even though he's pretty much a fast starter, or he's able to win by the cardio, he's a great well-rounded fighter. What concerns me with Yego's is the long layoff. That's also almost been a year. Like, both these guys have coming off long layoffs, and I don't understand why. You know, these are high-level guys who, like, they're not getting any younger. And then also the fact that he's been finished in the first round in each of his last 2 fights, so that's not encouraging. His striking is okay. It's probably only okay. And it's also just that level below Ricky Glenn. These fighters, like I said, they're both coming off long layoffs, so this is a sketchy pick, I would say. It's just a really tough fight to make, just because I haven't seen them in so long. I feel like I should go with Glenn, who is the better striker. But it's hard to also pick him because he looked horrible in the first rounds of his last fight until in the 3rd round, where he was able to dominate. But like I said, I also think drawing someone like Grant Dawson, that is impressive. You can't just be like, oh, that was a bad fight. Like, yes, I guess, yeah, you looked bad in the first 2 rounds. I didn't like that. But to 10-8 someone like Grant Dawson, that's super impressive. Like, if I saw Grant Dawson fight Yego's, you know, instead of Ricky Glenn, like at this point in their careers, Grant Dawson would, you know, he would kill Cristios Yego's at this point in their careers. And, you know, I think these guys are not super active, so it's really hard. You know, there's both major holes in each of their game. But I think Ricky's just so much better in the striking. I'll lean his way like the ever so slightest, but yeah, neither guy has won in a couple of years. But I'll ride with Ricky Glenn here, I guess. I'll say he loses the first round, but he comes out in the 2nd and 3rd and he wins those. So yeah, I'm going with the Ricky Glenn 29-20 decision. He's just gonna out technically box Yego's for 2 of the rounds. So moving on up the main card, we got a welterweight 170-pound fight between Jeremiah Wells and Matthew Semi the Jedi Semmelsberger. Such a funny nickname. But yeah, Wells, he's 11-2-1 with that one being a draw. A lot of draws on this card, I swear. You either get one card with no one with draws or a card where everyone has one draw on their resume. But yeah, Wells is super impressive. He's 3-0 in the UFC, and he's coming off 5 straight finish wins. He's got a 90-second knockout over Court McGee in his last fight. It was very fun to watch. He got super energized from that. Wells, surprisingly, even though he's new to the UFC, he is 36 years old and he's 5'9" with a 74-inch reach. Yeah, Wells is a scary dude. He has finishes in 9 of his 11 wins, and 5 of those being knockouts and 4 submissions. So super well-rounded guy. He's never been finished himself. Both of his losses are by decision. So also an extremely durable guy. You like seeing that, guys who are high finishers but also don't get finish. Yeah, very well-rounded, and he can just finish you in about any way possible, I can pretty much say. He does have a takedown threat, surprisingly. You think he's just out there trying to knock you out, but he has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's actually just trying to go out there and knock you down and end up blasting you on that submission. He's not like a highly technical boxer. He's got power in his hands, and he's just trying to get you down to the mat by knocking you down pretty much. He boxes very wild, but like I said, it's mainly just to get you to the floor. It feels like there's nothing this man can't do just because he's so dangerous in so many areas. But he hasn't truly been tested in the UFC yet, which I think Semelsberger will be that first guy. So moving on to Semelsberger. Semelsberger is 11-4, 5-2 in the UFC, 3-1 in his last 4, and he's coming off the decision win over Jake Matthews. I believe it was last December. And Semelsberger is 30 years old, 6'1" with a 75-inch reach. So he's an aggressive striker. He marches forward. He applies a lot of pressure throughout the fight. Great cardio too. He's not a super high finisher though. He only has 4 finishes in his last 8 fights. He does have a couple good knockouts in the UFC, but yeah, not a super high finisher. The knockout threat is there because he still has 6 of them, but I don't see that happening here necessarily. He's got fantastic leg kicks. He has pretty decent output. He's definitely not a boring guy to watch, even though he's mainly a decision fighter in his last few fights. This dude is also as tough as they come, and he also has plenty of power. And he has not been finished in the UFC. I think that's a big deal and benefits him a lot here, considering Wells is a finisher. So yeah, this is probably the toughest fight on the entire card to pick. Stylistically, these guys create like a living nightmare for each other. Both guys show a lot of forward pressure. One has a very high finish rate. I like Wells in this fight just because of his momentum, but man, Semelsberger is really tough. Like, Willis might not get the finisher, even though he's on a 3-0, UFC finish streak, but I liked him to get some takedowns and show off that, he has that wrestling, because we haven't been able to see that yet in the UFC. I think these guys could be pretty even on the feet, and Semelsberger will probably have the technical advantage. Yeah, Willis needs to mix in the grappling to have like a bigger chance, and I think he does. Yeah, I think he does so. I just can't see him going there expecting to finish a guy like Semelsberger, just like his previous 3 opponents. It's not happening just like that. He's not going to finish him early. He's not Core McGee. He's not Blood Diamond. He's not those kind of guys. Semelsberger's a level above those guys. Yeah, this is a big step up, but I'm going to go with a Jeremiah Wells 29-20 decision. I don't know what rounds he'll win, but I think he wins 2 of the 3 of them. Maybe he wins like 1 dominant round, and then 2 of the 3 of them are close, to where maybe we don't know who won the fight when it goes to the scorecards. But yeah, close fight by Wills winning by decision. Now moving up the main card, we got a flyweight 125-pound fight. This is moving over to the women's division. We got Yasmin Lucendo taking on Brogan Walker. So starting off with Lucendo, she's 13-5, 0-1 in the UFC, coming off the decision loss to Yasmin. I cannot say this last name. She lost to Yasmin, you guys. She's another up-and-comer contender. Anyway, Lucendo is 21 years old, 5'3" with a 66-inch reach, and she has very good boxing. She has 8 knockouts in 13 fights and 2 submissions as well. So she has a high finish rate too. She has, finishes in 10 of her 13 fights. Her big thing is she waits for opportunity. She lands a lot of counter strikes, And then she usually comes forward and, she has excellent clutch work, and then she'll try to take you to the ground in the wrestling. Like I said, she shoots lots of takedowns once she's hit you, with a good counter. And she tries to wear on her opponents throughout the fight. I'm a big fan of hers just because she has an exciting style, and she had a very exciting debut. Even though she lost in that debut, it was against another top future prospect, I believe. So, it was like two young future prospects going at it, and it was like an exciting fight, I remember. Despite the loss, I'm still very excited for her in this fight. She just couldn't get the grappling going in her debut, and that's like a big part of her threat. So, yeah, I think she gets that going here. But anyway, moving on to Brogan Walker. She's 8-3, also 0-1 in the UFC, coming off the third round knockout loss to Juliana Miller. So a couple things to note really quick. First, this is like Brogan's more official UFC debut because her last fight was the finale for season 30 of The Ultimate Fighter last summer. I consider this more of an official debut, even though they count the show's finale as her UFC debut. But I consider it's more of her official one where she's fighting an already contracted UFC fighter. Yeah, so the other thing I noticed about this fight is it's a very weird placement on the card. So this fight, features two fighters who are both 0-1 in the UFC. I mean, they both have name value, but they're both 0-1. And then one fighter is the loser of the Ultimate Fighter season 30. And then it's funny how you look at Mo Usman, brother of Kamaru Usman, who's on the prelims. He was the winner of the season 30 Ultimate Fighter. Like, so you had the men's heavyweight division that was one side of the season 30, and the other one was 125 for women's. Somehow Brogan, who lost in her finale, ended up on the main card over Mo Usman, who won his. It doesn't make sense. I just feel like I feel like both of them should be on the main card. It doesn't make sense why Usman's on the prelims. If you're going to put one on the prelims, I feel like both of them should be on it. And if there's going to be one on the main card, it should be the person who actually won the Ultimate Fighter season 30. But that's whatever. It just makes no sense to me. Usman won the show. And he's also a heavyweight too, which is like a weight class, fans like to see. The UFC prioritizes it. But anyways, we'll move on to Brogan Walker. Brogan is 34 years old, and she's 5'4" with a 67-inch reach. So Brogan's a decent fighter, but she has no finishing threat whatsoever. So this is kind of like a weird clash of styles. You have a high finisher versus someone who has really no threat. She has zero knockouts in general, no knockouts in MMA. And then she has one submission. So yeah, very low finisher. She has good wrestling and I would say okay control time. That's how she kind of wins fights. And she's done it against proven competition outside the UFC. You're talking about like people like Miranda Maverick, Aaron Blanchfield. She's fought good prospects outside the UFC. I was pretty high on her as a future prospect until she looked awful in her last fight. Like, she looked level below Juliana Miller. And then Juliana Miller, who won the Ultimate Fighter season 30, she debuted like a month ago and she didn't even look UFC caliber. So you're telling me, I mean, I try not to compare fights, but you're telling me Brogan Walker was a level above someone who doesn't look like a UFC fighter? That's not very convincing at all. So yeah, looking at this fight, I try not to compare fights, like I said, but these two are just on different levels. Like, I think one lost to like a future top contender and Yasmin, whatever her last name is, and the other lost to a low-level UFC fighter on the Ultimate Fighter show. That's a big difference in my opinion. Like, Lucindo has actual finishing ability as well, whereas Brogan doesn't have any. I was super impressed in Lucindo's debut, even with the loss. Meanwhile, Brogan looked horrible in her loss. I mean, I think she could be one of the top future contenders in the division, being only 21 years old. And like I said, Brogan's loss to Miller, in her last fight, hasn't aged well at all. I definitely like Lucindo in this fight. I'm just curious how she'll get it done exactly. I think Brogan's only been finished once, so I don't think she'll get finished back to back necessarily. So I'm gonna go with a Lucindo 30-27 decision where she wins all 3 rounds. Yeah, definitely all 3 rounds. Moving on to the feature fight, we got a lightweight 155-pound fight between Bobby Green and Jared Gordon. Bobby Green's 29-14-1 with one draw, and he's 10-9-1 in the UFC, coming off the second round knockout loss to Drew Dober 4 months ago. Bobby's 36 years old, 5'10 with a 71-inch reach, and unfortunately, he's 2-4 in his last 6, but it's all against high-level opponents. You're talking guys like Islam Makhachev, the champ, Drew Dober, who's ranked, Rafael Fiziev, who's I think he's at number 6, and Thiago Moises, who has been ranked. All top level guys. Yeah, but Green is some of the best boxing in the division, and he's pretty much as quick as they come, I would say. He literally hangs his hands by his waist. He doesn't even put it up by his head. Doesn't even defend his head a lot of the time. But he's just so slick. He can easily back out of range. And he just rarely gets clipped. He rarely gets hit. He's so slick with it. Many don't know this actually, but Bobby Green used to be a wrestler. So even though he loves the box, he also has that wrestling. Don't forget that. He's a very good counter wrestler. A lot of times guys try to expose his boxing, try to take him down. But then they realize, oh shoot, Bobby Green's also a wrestler and he has that strength. He has that underhook strength. So also, so he has that wrestling as a tool. And yeah, he's a super entertaining fighter and he talks a lot during the fight too. He has decent durability. I wouldn't be fooled with his last 2 fights where he was knocked out both times, but they're better than someone like Jared Gordon. Gordon, looking at him, he's 19-6, 7-5 in the UFC. Coming off I would say a highly controversial loss to Paddy Pimblett. It was a decision back in December. He nearly won. He clearly won 2 rounds of that fight. And it was probably one of the biggest robberies of last year, I would say. So Gordon is 34 years old, 5'9 with a 68-inch reach. And yeah, so Jared has great wrestling too and excellent cardio, some of the best cardio out there. But he's had mostly decision wins in the UFC. But they've been over some decent opponents at least. He's been knocked out 4 times, 3 times in the UFC. And that does worry me about him a little bit. I don't think Jared is a bad fighter by any means, but I don't know how much higher he'll climb. I think him getting a fight for someone like Bobby Green is like one of the highest moments he'll ever get. Like he could be in the UFC until he retires. He's 34. Maybe he'll make it like 3 or 4 more years. He could do like another contract, but he's not by any means like a future top 15 guy or anything like that. So looking at this fight, Bobby Green has a clear path to victory, obviously, and it's because he's gonna be the way better boxer here. And Green has excellent takedown defense. He'll use that here. I think he has like an 85-90% takedown defense, I want to say. And takedowns are the only places. It's like the only place I could see Gordon, winning this fight. Gordon's been knocked out 4 times, like I said. And Bobby Green has a lot of finishes. He's got 10 knockouts, 8 submissions. High finishing ability from Bobby King Green. I think Bobby Green finishes Gordon in this fight. He'll have the higher output too, so he'll be winning the rounds. He's going to win this fight regardless, whether it's by decision or finish. I see Bobby Green all the way. As long as this fight stays standing, I love Bobby in the boxing, like I said. I don't think he'll finish Gordon early or anything like that. But he'll have way more damage landed throughout the fight. I could see Bobby even dropping Gordon maybe at the end of the second round. And then Gordon doesn't recover on the stool in between rounds, in between the second and third round. I think then Green comes out in the third round, early third, gets another knockdown in the boxing, jumps on top, maybe adds in a couple elbows in the ground and pound, and the ref, has no choice but to step in. So I'm calling an early third round knockout for Bobby King Green. I butchered that. I'm so sorry, Bobby Green. Bobby King Green. You're so much better than that. You deserve better. So moving on to the co-main event, it's a middleweight 185-pound fight between Brad Tavares, and Bruno Silva. So Brad Tavares, not Tavares, is 19-8, 14-7 in the UFC, coming off the decision loss to Dricus Duplessis. Sorry guys, I can't word names today apparently. And this was last July. So that loss is aging, I would say, very well, considering Dricus is now number 6 and has 2 wins since then. Yeah, over Darren Till and Derek Brunson. And yeah, the fact that Dricus du Plessis has 19 wins, 18 wins by finish, and the only guy he has not been able to finish was Brad Tavares. So that just shows how tough Brad pretty much is. And yeah, Brad's aging. He's 35 years old, 6'1" with a 74-inch reach. And yeah, he's 2-3 in his last 5 fights, and he's been super inactive. I think he's only fought, let's see here. He's only fought 4 times in the last 5 years, so super inactive. I'd love to see him fight more. But I do want to know his losses are only to the best, so he's a super high-level guy. And even though he's not ranked, all of his losses are pretty much to ranked guys, guys in the top 15. And he has an interesting style. He's capable of finishing guys, but he only has 7 finishes and 19 wins. So he's more of a decision grinder, especially in the UFC. He's not super dangerous anywhere, but he's super well-rounded, I would say. He's one of the better wrestlers in the entire division, and he's as tough as they come. He also has a high 90% takedown defense, and he's a tricky guy to beat. You pretty much have to beat him in the striking and avoid his takedowns to win the fight. I like his forward pressure because he uses that a lot, and despite having many decisions, he has a lot of decision wins, but he's still a fun guy to watch. When he's actually being being active and fighting, he's one of my favorite guys in the UFC. Now moving over to Silva. Silva's 22-8, 3-2 in the UFC, coming off the submission loss to Gerald GM3 Meerschaert. So Silva's 33 years old, 6 foot with a 74-inch reach. Yeah, he's now lost back-to-back, which is kind of concerning, considering he had so much hype at one point. So he's a very weird fighter. So listen to this. So he's an awesome kickboxer. He probably has top 10 power in the division. He has 19 knockouts and 22 wins. So super dangerous guy. That says a lot. 19 knockouts. That's insane. I think it's crazy also he's never been knocked out himself. Yet he's been submitted 6 times and he has 0 submissions himself. So yeah, very much a pure kickboxer. He has no grappling game. In his last 2 fights, he's completely confused me. So listen to this. He fought Alex Pereira, the guy who literally lost the belt 2 weeks ago. He fought Pereira to a decision. And even though Pereira won, Bruno Silva lost, it was like a respectable decision loss. Silva was still really impressive. You're fighting, the former double champ glory kickboxer Alex Pereira, and you're losing only by decision, where you could argue he even won a round. Then he goes on to fight Gerald GM3 Meerschaert, where, in my opinion, I thought that was like a lock of the fight. It was like a lock of a fight where I thought Bruno Silva would kill Gerald GM3 Meerschaert. GM3 has been knocked out so many times. So he looked great versus the world-class kickboxer in the fight before. Like I said, I try not to compare fights, and then he gets dropped and submitted by GM3, the grappler. So he couldn't box with the grappler who has at times horrific boxing, but he could box with the real kickboxer. It makes no sense to me. So yeah, somehow GM3 looked better than against Silva than Pereira, the former champ, did. Weird stuff. So yeah, looking at this fight, I don't trust Bruno Silva at all anymore. After that last fight. If this fight was a year ago, I would absolutely pick Silva over Brad, but it's not like that anymore. Back-to-back losses, guys decline so fast in the sport. Yeah, pretty much that last fight versus GM3 tells me Pereira might even he might even took something out of Silva. Just made him not the same fighter, made him like a shell of him of his old self. Maybe we caught Silva on a bad night at the office in his last fight, but I'm not banking on him. I don't trust him anymore. I think Tavares exposes his ground game here and gets the wrestling going. Wouldn't surprise me if Brad somehow got the finish, even though he has a very low finishing ability. Because Silva's been submitted 6 times. Brad has low finishing ability, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna say Brad Tavares gets this fight done by a 29-28 decision. Wouldn't surprise me if you go by submission. Maybe one round is like mainly striking and Silva wins it. But I see 2 of the 3 rounds where Brad gets takedowns, controls the fight. That's an easy Brad Tavares 20-28 decision. Moving on to the main event. It's a heavyweight 265-pound fight between number 3 Sergey Pavlovich versus number 4 Curtis Blades. I'm so pumped for this fight. Pavlovich is 17-1, 5-1 in the UFC, coming off 5 straight first round knockouts and the 1 minute knockout over Tai Tuivasa. Pavlovich is 30 years old, which is super young for a heavyweight, and he's 6'3" with an 84-inch reach. Is that real? I feel like that reach might tie John Jones for the longest reach in UFC history, so that's pretty cool there. Pavlovich, he feels like a Russian lab experiment. Yeah, he's only 10 pounds under the 265-pound limit, but he's built like a tank. You know, most guys who are up at that limit, they're not shredded, they're not all muscular. This guy's huge. And he possesses that typical, that Russian strength, and his hands are so fast for heavyweight. Like, in his last 2 fights, I've never seen like a heavyweight with that speed and power like combined. Like, it usually have one or the other. Like, it literally feels like at the speed he's going, it still feels like when he lands on an opponent, he can just knock you out or drop you just with one punch. And he's swinging wild and he's mixing in combos. Like most guys with one punch knockout ability, you're looking at like Derek Lewis. This guy's one punch knockout ability, and he's throwing 3 or 4 punches at you. That's scary. It's like Francis Ngannou level. So yeah, he has 14 knockouts too, but 0 submissions. So while I'm making him sound like the Incredible Hulk, he does have a massive hole in his game. He has like 0 wrestling or grappling skills, I would say, which is actually funny because most people usually figure that the Russian fighter, is the better wrestler. But no, back in Pavlovich's debut back in 2018 versus it was Alistair Overeem. He was taken down in that first round. He posed like no threat to get back on his feet, and he was eventually TKO'd on the ground after getting pretty tired actually. So luckily he does have pretty good takedown defense and he is pretty strong. But if he does get taken down, it feels like he's not getting back up. So moving over to Curtis Blades, he's 17-3, 12-3 in the UFC, coming off 3 straight wins and the injury TKO over Tom Aspinall. That injury was weird where Tom Aspinall blew his knee 30 seconds into the fight, so it wasn't like a real win. Or it was a win, but it's not valid. Curtis is 32 years old, 6'4" with the 80-inch reach. It's kind of crazy. 80-inch reach is super impressive, but he's fighting the guy who's, I'm pretty sure, like I said, tied for the longest reach in UFC history at 84. So Curtis has the best wrestling at heavyweight next to John Jones. My friends always call me crazy for this, but I've said Blades like the dark horse at heavyweight for years. I've always thought he's like he has like upside to be a future champion, I would say. He lost to Francis Ngannou twice over 5 years ago, and Francis left the UFC as a champ, so not a bad loss, or not both those losses aren't bad. Then he had what I call like his fluke loss of his career. It was versus Derek Lewis. Like that one fight where he was definitely the better fighter, but he just got caught, being dumb. But yeah, Blades had, he has great cardio, excellent wrestling, and he can go 5 rounds. And he's actually starting to find power in his hands. His knockouts in two of his last 3 fights. So yeah, he's getting better there. And like I said, out of all of the current UFC heavyweights, I think he's the most likely to beat John Jones. I don't know if he necessarily would, but I just like throwing that scenario out there because he has a possibility. You can't just rule it out. And I think it's more possible than people think, especially if he wins this fight. So man, I'm so torn on this fight. So both these guys are so entertaining. I wish they could both win. And they both pose like major threats against each other. So it's gonna be a really weird clash of styles. So obviously the winner of this fight will get a title fight next, probably like early 2024, versus the heavyweight champ. Here's what's funny. I think if Blades wins, he loses a bigger threat. Or sorry, if Blades wins, he poses like a bigger threat against John Jones, but I don't think he's gonna win here. I think styles make fights, and Pavlovich, he poses a bigger threat against Blades. There's always the possibility, Blades gets takedowns here too, like he usually does, and he grinds at a 5-round decision, or maybe like a late round finish. This is why he's a slight favorite, I would say, because I feel like that's the most likely scenario. Well, in the betting setters' minds, but Pavlovich, he poses the one thing that Blades does not like at all, and that's pure power. This fight has two possibilities in my mind. Blades exposes Pavlovich's low grappling skills, or Pavlovich, clips Blades early. If he can knock out guys like Derek Lewis and Tai Tuivasa in a minute, he surely can hurt Curtis Blades early. Like I said, I love Curtis Blades, and he's my dark horse heavyweight. But I think he's getting knocked out. So I'm going with the first round knockout win for Sergey Pavlovich. I don't love the pick, but I just think he continues this first round knockout streak. And then I don't think Pavlovich beats John Jones down the line. So I think it's funny. Like I said, Blades poses a bigger threat, but Pavlovich is a better fighter than Blades. It's just kind of funny. So I think you could get like a triangle eventually where you have Blades beating John Jones beating Sergey, and Sergey beating Blades. That'd be the funniest thing like 2 years from now. Now heading over to the NBA. So each NBA first round series is done with 2 games. I'm going to give a quick recap over where each series is at. I'll be breaking down just 6 of the 8 series. 2 days ago, I broke down the Sixers versus Nets and the Kings versus Warriors, who were both at 2 games at the time. But those series they haven't played their game 3 yet. Their game 3s are tonight. So just breaking down 6 series. And as mentioned on Tuesday's show, the Sixers are up 2-0 on the Nets, heading to Brooklyn for game 3 tonight. And the Kings are up 2-0 on the Warriors, heading to the Bay for their game 3. So moving on to the Western Conference series, we got the number 1 Denver Nuggets, and they're up 2-0 on the number 8 Minnesota Timberwolves. So yeah, I still think the Nuggets are going to win like 4 or 5 games. This is an easy series for them. Game 2 was a little closer and it was very fun to watch, but yeah, Jamal Murray and Anthony Edwards, they both scored 40 points. So yeah, very cool game. Like I said last show, Jamal Murray is back and he's fully healthy. That's huge for the Nuggets. And yeah, the Timberwolves were actually winning game 2 heading into the 4th quarter. But Jokic and Murray, they just had a clutch 4th quarter. They've been huge for them all season. And yeah, the Nuggets play great team defense, and that's always a huge part of their success. I also love watching Jeff Green off the bench too. That guy is timeless. And he actually has a pretty big role. I felt like he had more than 11 points the other night. He's just one of those guys who makes like a big impact, just being on the floor. So this series heading back to Minnesota now. Yeah, back to Minnesota for game 3. I could see Anthony Edwards, dropping like another 40 piece with a win. I think they split 2 games in Minnesota just because Minnesota has like a little bit of heart. They head back to Denver and the Nuggets close it out in 5 games. I'm putting a lot of stock in Jamal Murray right now because he's going to reach a whole new level during these playoffs. So moving on, number 2 Memphis Grizzlies are tied 1-1 with the Los Angeles Lakers. So yeah, this series has actually gone as I predicted so far. I thought it would be pretty back and forth. I thought they'd split both of the first 2 games, then go back and forth in the last 3. I think I have the Lakers here, but man, that game 2 was not good to watch. Ja Morant missed game 2 for the Grizzlies, which felt like the perfect opportunity, for the Lakers to go up 2-0. But the Grizzlies looked way better. They were hitting shots, they were going on runs. Meanwhile, it felt like the Lakers couldn't even get their offense going. So yeah, the Lakers are thankful they won that game one. But yeah, it would have been huge if they went back home, up 2-0. It would be huge now if LA, wins both games at home, but I think they split them. Going 3-1 would pretty much the series be over. I don't think LeBron, blows a 3-1 lead. And I don't think this young Grizzlies team comes back from down 3-1. I could just imagine like an emotional Dylan Brooks, how he'd be on the floor down 3-1. Yeah, but yeah, I still like the Lakers here just because they have the home court advantage now. And all the Lakers need to do is, win games 3, 4, and 6 at home. They have that advantage. I think they fixed things from game 2. Well, I hope. And they need to find ways to stop, guys like Xavier Tillman. Like a dude like him should not be dropping 22 points and 13 rebounds in a playoff game. So yeah, I think the Lakers figured it out, but they maybe win this still in 6 or 7. Moving on, number 4 Phoenix Suns are tied 1-1 with number 5 Los Angeles Clippers. So I'm glad the Suns bounced back in game 2. Like they looked slow out there in game 1, and they also fell behind early in game 1. They fell behind early in game 2 as well. They went down by almost 15 in like the second quarter. But they quickly like regrouped. I think it was like a 10-point game like right before halftime, and then the Suns were down by 10. And the Suns went on to like a 12-2 run, and it was tied at half. That was huge because they had all the momentum swayed their way for the second half. And yeah, Booker and Durant were super efficient in game 2, kind of like how they should always look. Westbrook and Kawhi, they had good games for the Clippers, but you can just tell they're missing Paul George out there. They really appreciate, I would say, like his two-way presence and his ability, to take pressure off of Kawhi. So yeah, the Suns, they took care of that crucial game 2, and they took care of business. Now they need to split, I would say, the next 2 games in Los Angeles, which is a higher possibility now with Kawhi out. If they go up 3-1, the series is over. Yeah, I think they split the games in Los Angeles. That Kawhi being back for game 4 will be huge. So yeah, this will be a tight series that goes 7 games. But like I said, this is when the home court advantage for Phoenix will show why it's so important. So now time for the 3 East series at 2 games apiece. The number 1 Milwaukee Bucks are now tied with the number 8 Miami Heat 1-1. So yeah, the Bucks, they tied this at game 2 without Giannis. Super impressive. And they were up most of the game. Like this was a very easy game for them. That's just super encouraging to see. I do worry because they won't be able to play like last night every night, obviously. Like the Bucks will not win most playoff series without Giannis, in their lineup. Considering they were like optimistic about Giannis playing, in game 3, that means he'll probably be back for next game. But if he's not, that's when I start to worry. If Giannis comes back, I think they could easily win 1 or 2 games next in Miami. But if he remains out and they blow both those games and go down 3-1, they're in a bad place. Like I said, Giannis will probably back though, so I still have faith in this team. They just need to win like 3 of the next 5 games, and I think they do so. I like Middleton, Lopez, Holiday. I think all guys can score 25 plus for the Bucks. I think the Heat will struggle too, like I said, from making shots from the wing, from 3 without Tyler Hero. I think the Bucks could win the series without Giannis for like a game or 2, but not much more. I'm gonna call the Bucks still win in 7 games, but it's gonna be very tight throughout the whole entire series. Now moving on, number 2 Boston Celtics are up 2-0 on the Atlanta Hawks. So this is the most boring series to me. I knew Boston would look dominant and it wouldn't feel close. Game 2 wasn't much different than game 1, I would say, minus the 30-point lead. The Celtics were up by double digits in most of the game. Trae Young had a horrific shooting splits again. And Derek White was Boston's secret weapons. Nothing really changed from game 1 to game 2. I think White is definitely the X factor for being Boston's, third like reliable scorer at this point, and he's delivered. Atlanta probably needs to win, the next 2 games at home to have any chance, but I don't see that happening. I think the Hawks like snap out of it for like a game. Yeah, I think they'll get a win at home, but Boston will steal one on the road because the Hawks are mediocre. They're average. I love Trae Young, but he needs more help here. Yeah, I think Boston goes up 3-1 the next 2 games, and they head back to Boston in 5 and close it out. Moving on. The number 4 Cleveland Cavs are tied 1-1 with the Knicks. I'm glad the Cavs, snapped out of it for game 2. They were up for most of the game. It kind of looked like how I figured this. I wasn't sure how the series would look. And Garland had a huge game for the Cavs in game 2 with he had 32 points. He just showed how many guys for the Cavs, they have to score. The Knicks looked awful. They only had 90 points. The Cavs defense, really stepped up here. I love going through Julius Randle's stats after every playoff game. This dude had 22 points on 8 of 20 shooting. Horrific. I will forever make fun of and crucify Randle's shooting splits in important games. Yeah, so this series is heading back to New York now. I don't think it matters too much. The Cavs will steal a game probably in New York, and then they'll head back to Cleveland tied 2-2. I thought Cleveland would originally be able to get this series done in like 5 games, but that's definitely not the case at this point. It's going to be competitive back and forth. I'm glad they were at least able to avoid going down 2-0, leaving Cleveland. I think they still win the series in 7 games. And similar to the Suns, they'll prove, why home court matters. Now, wrapping up the show, some quick news of the day. So Buffalo Bills safety DeMar Hamlin, he's been cleared to play for next season, which is huge. So just a big deal, obviously, because, he went into cardiac arrest in the middle of a game and collapsed on the field last December. He was unresponsive, for 7 minutes on the field, went into a coma, and ended up out of the hospital within 2 weeks. It was a remarkable recovery. Such a cool story, and I'm still amazed he didn't take any like long-term damage from that scene. Many people were fearing if he would survive, that he'd have some brain damage from literally dying on the field. If he plays multiple games this next season, he's already my pick for comeback player of the year. Probably the easiest pick of all time, I would say. And how cool is that he'll be back? I'm hoping they have a lot of physicals too, though, because they should not risk anything there. But yeah, super happily for DeMar Hamlin. So yeah, that's everything for today. Enjoy the NBA Game 3s and Game 4s this weekend, and the UFC Vegas 71 this weekend. I'll be back on Tuesday, live at 1 o'clock, to recap this weekend and talk next Thursday's NFL draft. Super excited about the draft. Thanks for tuning in to Sports Takes with Dom. I'm your host, Dominic Persinger, for the KOUG Radio.